Our film invites you on a journey that has involved us for 5 years and taken us to a dozen countries. It's a journey about seeds, about the seeds we plant to grow crops like beans, maize and wheat. Where do these seeds come from? Who controls them? We didn't get anything like all the answers, but one thing is certain. Whatever one's discipline or politics, we all depend on seeds for life.
Venancia, pecho de cabra, pelo de noche venancia, por nacer en la montaña, sos hija de la guerrilla, compañera campesina.
Que sos arrecha Venancia, te grita el cerro quemado, porque llevas el recado al compañero Bernardino.
Tené cuidado Venancia, si te agarran te torturan, y tu sonrisa Venancia es bandera en nuestra lucha. Ellos tienen un fusil, vos un hermano enterrado, que mataron los soldados porque era del sindicato. Ellos tienen un fusil, vos un hermano enterrado, que mataron los soldados porque era del sindicato. Tener cuidado, Venancia, compañera campesina.
The sandstone area west of Sydney, Australia.
This is the woody pear, they ate the seeds. But this plant up here, the Guymere lily, you see that big stem with the flower it's on. Well, the Aborigines used to cut that off when it was several feet high and thick, and they would eat that or bake it.
I understand during Depression years that they realised that the leaf had great potential as a sort of flax and rope making.
And of course it's also one of the important horticultural plants in the ornamental industry in Australia. Well, now see this plant, for instance, this is a wattle, and you take those seeds, for instance. People are doing research now into wattles in Australia and finding they have the most fantastic protein content in the seeds, more protein in them than any of the commercial cereal crops. And another thing is not all the wattles are edible, some of them deemed poisonous, but this means they've probably got medicinal properties, pharmaceutical properties. Now this is an interesting plant, the geebung or Pesunia, and they all had a fruit that was eaten by the Aboriginals rather in the same way that we would eat olives. It has an astringent flavour and was very popular with them.
Serrated leafed banksia, commonly called old man banksia. The Aboriginals used it for the honey. They'd take the cobs, break them off, and smack them into the palm of their hands and lick their hands. Very simple way.
This just around here, it's like a botanical kitchen. You've got vegetables in the cabbage tree palm, you've got vegetables in the ferns, you've got the fruits of the cissus, fruits of the geebung, roots for staples, nectar for dessert. It's all here.
I suppose as a yardstick we can say there are more plant varieties in the Sydney sandstone area than the entire United Kingdom.
I believe that this resource is so important that it should stay in the public domain at this stage. If the Australians understood the full implications of plant variety rights and patenting of plants, they would be very upset. Most Australians, when you tell them that there is a proposal to be able to patent plant genetic resources or plants, are really shocked.
We've seen that the way in which governments regulate industries, what products we're going to have and the prices they're going to sell them at, and so when the first bill arrived in Australia, looked more closely at the legislation and found that there were these fairly unfortunate implications for consumers. We opposed it initially, I must say, because the legislation was so badly drafted. It was so hard to see what they were getting at. As it became clearer and clearer what they were wanting to get at, we became clearer and clearer that we didn't want it.
I think everybody can sense in some way that the flora are a national heritage in a way that the tomato, which came from another part of the world, is not part of our heritage. But as people are becoming more aware of the unique properties of the Australian continent, I think their pride in the flora and their awareness of the value of it as something our society can benefit from, that's increasing very rapidly.
The Netherlands, a nation built on land won from the sea.
U vraagt net, is er na die afsluiting heel veel veranderd? Ja, ontzaglijk veel. Het was hier zoutwater. Als zodanig haring, ansjovis, bot, schol, garnalen, mosselen, noem maar op. Dat kwam in die Zuiderzee voor. Maar op het ogenblik is hij zoet. Komt er geen haring meer, komt er geen schol meer voor, komen er geen mosselen meer voor. Dat is afgelopen. Dan is het zo dat er van een bunder land meer komt als van een bunder water. Of een hectare, hoe als u het noemen wilt.
Opnieuw zou, als u nu weer 12 zou zijn, zou u dan meer visserman worden of een boer?
Visserman. Visman. Ah, vrij. Vrij.
Wij een erg klein land hebben dat dicht bevolkt is en die zich dus veel hebben toegelegd op handel om de kosten in het buitenland te verdienen. Mijn grootvader is begonnen met handel in aardappelen, uien, koolrapen in 1898. Nou, die werden allemaal met de hand gelegd. Er werden eerst gaten geboord. En dan kropen die mensen daar achteraan. En die legden in al die gaten de aardappelen. Die voorgekiemd waren in bakjes. Ik weet het niet. Ik zeg wel eens, aardappelen, dat is bij ons een familiekwaal. Dus misschien was ik toch wel in de aardappelen gebleven. Maar het is ook wel mogelijk dat ik toch pianist was geworden.
The grouse in this area, they are producing the best, the finest bulbs, because the soil is better than elsewhere in the country. And most of the time, you sell your bulbs to companies who export them to other countries. Well, every country has its own rules. One of them, most important, is that you've got to have a parcel which uniform. One woman in France, Spain, or Germany, England, she wants some flowers, and she wants good flowers, beautiful flowers, good of color.
When a tulip is sick, he gives not a good color. You know, and a white tulip changes to red and white and yellow in one flower, and that's not nice. Because the client asks always uniformity.
For producing a big assortment, for producing really new varieties, penetrating the world market, okay, you need a very heavy capital intensive company. Otherwise, you're out of business. That's no moral issue. That's the way enterprising are behaving and trying to survive. At the same time as we hope we are producing for human needs. The first thing is very clear. We are producing for the market.
Nou, de meesten die gaan dus naar de landen rond de Middellandse Zee. En dat zijn voor ons Tunesië, Egypte, Israël, Libanon, Jordanië, Syrië, Jemen, Cyprus, Malta, Griekenland, Spanje, Italië, zoals Argentinië, Brazilië, Uruguay, Venezuela, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Thailand. En natuurlijk naar de landen om ons heen. En naar de Oostbloklanden. Wij exporteren dus ook naar Hongarije, Tsjechoslowakije, Joegoslavië. En naar de Scandinavische landen zoals Denemarken en Zweden.
People of the Moluccan, Suriname and Papuan communities, now resident in the Netherlands, gathered at Enkhuizen, a small Dutch town famous as an international seed production centre. They'd come to discuss seeds.
Dames en heren, welkom van onze kant naar de Enkhuizense gemeenschap. We weten dat de derde wereld bij vele Nederlanders nog ergens in het achterhoofd leeft, ondanks het feit dat wij veel eerder kennis hebben kunnen maken in de tijd van de slavernij met de Nederlandse gemeenschap. En een van de dingen die ons vandaag hier heeft gebracht is het feit dat wij verschillende planten en zaden in ons land hebben gekweekt. En die zaden hebben hun weg gevonden naar het westen. Wij komen onze zaden hier weer tegen. Soms herkennen we ze nauwelijks meer. Vandaag komen we hier om met u te praten en te kijken welke weg deze zaden hebben afgelegd. En we hopen dat u van uw kant begrip zult opbrengen voor ons standpunt. En van onze kant wij tot inzichten kunnen komen waarom u een bepaald standpunt inneemt.
Je kan ook een stampot van maken, je kan er ook soep van koken. Je kan alles, maar het is ook een aardvrucht. En die dingen groeien gewoon in de natuurgrond, zonder mest, zonder niks. En je kan hele mandjes vol halen uit de grond. Dat noemen ze nyamisi. Die meneer alleen, om wat vissen te zoeken en zo. En toen kwam hij een heel grote kanal tegen. Dat was boven de aarde, zo groot was het. Nou, toen hakte hij een stukje ervan af. En toen bracht hij het thuis. En toen ging hij gewoon maar zijn pot opzetten en koken. Die mevrouw vroeg, wat is dat ding nou? Toen zei hij, blijf stil, nyang missie. Dat wil zeggen, zweep en eet. Dus nyang missie.
Gomote, ni aksen fuang. Gomote, ano wan impang. Gomote, ma misa teken. Gomote, no over my dead body. Nee,
een partij sang wana wan foru, atra partij soma chibraf aforu, voor asmano grabbing. Aka. Na a Ik kan taki na Uroko, na organisatie van Grondtaputang. Ik kan we ook toen in we eigen kondre proberen. Fu Chibri, some gudu sawi abangasani, fu trakondre no tekden. We shitaki, dika den kondre moro maki, de grabu, den san die we want Chibri, purna in de anu.
Ethiopia is a country rich in genetic diversity. Quite a number of crops have originated there or have what we call a secondary gene center. And there's a lot of genetic diversity. So about 10 years ago, there was this graduate who visited Ethiopia, and he was there for about 2 years. Amongst one of the crops that he was going to study was Ethiopian mustard from the point of view of oilseeds. Oh, I think it was 6 months he spent in the Somalia prison because he was hitting the border area and was picked up by Somali army. So they put him in prison not knowing what the hell this man was doing there. Anyway, it was all in all 2 years, and he picked up samples of seed from markets. And we have produced something in the order of between 100 grams and a kilogram of seed of each of these accessions, which subsequently we are going to send back to Ethiopia. Now, the Indians are very keen because rapeseed in certain parts of India are very important. Secondary crop, but nevertheless, it's very important for oilseed purposes, for vegetable oil purposes. But there is another party that has been requesting me for seed, which is one from California. Sending it to India, a developing country, I'm glad. But I'm somewhat hesitant to send it to California, where they have the research capacity to develop the crop, to develop useful varieties. However, you know, California being probably almost the richest area in the world, they want to become even more rich on the basis of this rough and ready material, but nevertheless. I will send it eventually to California, there's no doubt about it. The official approval is there. The basis of it is the discrepancy. There is this very poor country and there is this rich country. Why should the rich country be maneuvered in a position where they can exploit this resource to their benefit?
You kan tak ni na exemple d'ici, a trakondre na aka, evi, na de mama kouru de kibri den traktiwa.
Diosa del maíz, mujer de diversas edades, cargas en tu vientre la semilla que alimenta mi país.
Nosotros sabemos que siempre el humano, la primera palabra que pronuncia al iniciar su lenguaje es la palabra mamá. Y en nuestro caso me atrevería a decir que la segunda palabra es maíz, porque es indudable que, por lo menos, pues el pueblo nicaragüense, y que han nacido muy cerca del maíz y donde sus progenitores están preocupados, están empeñados en que siempre haya maíz, porque esa es la energía, eso es lo que alimenta también el espíritu, el ansia de vivir de esa gente. Entonces, esa fuerza y ese deseo se transfiere a toda una población.
madre, soy el hijo que ha venido hasta tu vientre, que ha brotado de la tierra nuevamente en la espiga del maíz, trayendo en las mazorcas la bandera proletaria de la patria liberada que hoy regresa a tu raíz.
Recordar también una de las expresiones que aparecen en el Popol Vuh, cuando hicieron la Biblia de los mayas, que invocaron al maíz, invocaron también al zité. Estas son semillas de zité. Entonces, esta es una leguminosa, un árbol, una leguminosa. Entonces el zité, el maíz y otras divinidades concurrieron, ¿verdad?, para que el hombre de América fuera creado.
Estamos viviendo un momento de agresión. Y es por eso que nosotros tenemos que principalmente organizarlos dentro de nuestra cooperativa, cuidar nuestros centros de trabajo con estos fusiles, para que el enemigo no penetre, tal vez a quemarlos una máquina, tal vez a destruir la producción que tenemos. Por ejemplo, esta cooperativa es vanguardia en la defensa, donde han habido 17 compañeros movilizados en la frontera y han estado combatiendo frente a frente con el enemigo y han estado movilizados hasta 6 meses, hemos estado. Sí. También aquí las mujeres de nosotros, sí, en el momento que estamos movilizados nosotros en la defensa, las mujeres están levantando las cosechas que dejamos aquí.
¿Ya ocurrió alguna vez?
Sí, ¿sí? Por 2 veces lo han hecho las cosas ya.
¿Y sacaron todo?
Sí, han sacado todo y no han dejado caer ni siquiera un grano de frijol ni de maíz.
¿Cómo siente usted, los compañeros?
Bueno,
una variedad, pero la cosa fue que fue una variedad introducida hace no sé cuántos años, muchos años. Entonces esa variedad se sembró, la trajeron, se probó, se sembró, dio magníficos resultados, pero no quedó una sola semilla, porque toda se exportó. Pero fue en tiempos de la dictadura. Entonces no, o sea, ellos dicen, si nosotros nos hubiéramos quedado con una cebolla, un bulbo, podemos seguirla. Pero no, o sea, eso era, dice que hasta cerrado, con alambre y todo, no dejaban entrar a nadie. Increíble. Era un agricultor amigo de Somoza, ¿verdad? Y entonces sus trabajadores controlaron todita la producción, sí, y toda se exportó.
Y nadie
quedó con semillas.
Ni el nombre siquiera.
Nada.
The stewardship of plant genetic resources is the theme of the annual meeting of 9 countries in the Central American region. The meeting is hosted in rotation by the member countries. The year we filmed, it was Nicaragua's turn.
Nuestros países no pueden depender en alimentos de los países más desarrollados. Tienen que ser autosuficientes en alimentos. Ante este marco histórico, la revolución exige transformaciones agrarias, implica transformaciones económicas en el uso del crédito, en el acceso a la maquinaria, a los insumos, una política correcta de precios, una política correcta de acopio.
El híbrido en Panamá, y no me vayan a criticar lo que venden, consideramos un poco caro. La variedad el año pasado salió a $38.50 quintal de 100 libras. El híbrido salió en un promedio de $98 quintal 100 libras. Entonces, 3 años atrás teníamos al menos, posiblemente no pasábamos de 5% del área sembrada con las variedades nacionales y en este momento ya hemos aumentado.
Pero no debemos subestimar a nuestros agricultores. En la región norte, en la región 1, una de las mejores semillas de producción de papa, digamos, me desvío un poco, es precisamente una cooperativa de agricultores. Es decir, si nosotros lo entrenamos bien, ellos van a hacer un buen trabajo también. No debemos...
Entonces lo que comenta él es que realmente la mayor parte de los organismos financiadores están convencidos de que la conservación es la primera prioridad y que la utilización, bueno, sí se da en el futuro.
Realmente está aprovechando un poco de lo existente, de lo potencialmente existente, y que se hace necesario tener una infraestructura especial para, ¿qué va? Exploración, colección, mantenimiento, caracterización, ¿qué es lo que más? ¿Qué eres el experto? Uso y utilización, ¿verdad? Y que esto implica, pues, erogaciones y, desde luego, un entendimiento claro de que es más que un juego académico. Claro, no se va a poner eso, ¿verdad?
There's just a higher energy level. You just feel that now it's understood to be an issue which is vital to their own food production, and it's also understood to be an issue which involves their national integrity, their sovereignty over their own natural resources. Increasingly, it's from ambassadors that you get the comment, or from seed production officials in countries. The comment comes that why should we be donating this resource to industrialized countries who are simply turning it around and patenting it for their own interests? And
countries of the world depend very heavily on the plant genetic diversity that's available in Asia and Africa and Latin America. Latin America gave the European countries a problem. It was necessary to steal the rubber plant from Brazil and to steal the cinchona from the Andes region against national laws. The rationale on the part of the industrialized countries was genetic conservation. But whereas a century ago, the effort was to identify commercially useful plants and move them as needed around the world, today the need is to identify genetic materials, germplasm, gene complexes, and move those around the world. For the first time, we have to recognize that genetic resources are not simply a scientific or a technical question. They are also a question of politics, a question of economics, and requiring the vital participation of all of humanity.
Por tu pelo rojo, coloradito, que mece el viento, por esa sonrisa, yo vivo feliz. Cuando te acaricio, si vos supieras lo que yo siento, siento que reviento y me dan ganas de vivir.
De maíz eres, de pies a cabeza maíz, tu piel, el perfume que exhalas, tu boca, el sabor de maíz, embriagándolo todo. La gracia que te hace sentir por doquier y ser maíz.
Verdecito verde, verde es la ilusión. Verdecito tierno, es tu corazón. Verdecito verde, verde es la ilusión. Siempre que te miro, se me inflama el corazón. Tu vestido es verde, como la esperanza que ha brotado en mí. Por eso te cuido como vos cuidas de mí.
Food is most important than anything in the world, not only in the third world, but in any country. Food. And what's happening in nature is that this type of materials that we are talking about are in danger of extinction. There are many species which already are extinct. Never more you will be able to find again, because it's extinct. If you know the word of extinct, as I imagine you know very well, means disappear forever. Extinction is forever in any living organism. Could be a hummingbird species, could be a potato species, could be a barley species, could be a little tiny monk, any living organism. Extinct, no more. Forget it.
Genetic richness tends to be preserved in pockets where farming families continue to farm in a traditional way. The pockets could be in Afghanistan, Bolivia, Malawi, Vietnam or Greece. This pocket is in the southern highlands of Italy.
Qua siamo in montagna, delle volte più quando non ricava niente e non quando ricavo qualche cosa, figliamo.
Che cosa coltivi? Coltivo qualche poco di verdura, il vino, che c'ha legna, qualche altra cosa, metto un po' di aglio, un po' di cipolle, tutto roba personale, roba per indumento di casa.
Difficoltà. Come aspettavo quando ti scrivo.
Ma non
Tanto faccio buono
ci puoi, qua no, non c'è niente.
Se quel buono ciò non ci faccio, perché mi tutti i fatti che mi fa. Sono molto spesso, succede. Ma quest'anno non avevo proprio niente.
Agricoltore diretto, vai sempre morto.
Agricoltore diretto, proprio che si abituato.
Proprio in terzo. Fatichiamo.
Se lavora assai, ma guadagna poco.
Molto grosso e bello, però io ricordo sempre, anche così parlando con mio padre e con i miei nonni, hanno sempre coltivato questo tipo di aglio in queste zone ed è sempre venuto molto bene, gli spicchi ottimi.
Questa lattuga riccia, questi sono i semi che è in procinto di fiorire, no? Adesso, quando sono secchi, si possono adoperare per l'anno prossimo per fare di nuovo i semenzai.
Si conservano per molto tempo? Sì.
Massimo 2 anni, così si può tenere, sennò dopo va male.
Questi sono dei semi di cavolo che abbiamo raccolto 2 giorni fa. Adesso li abbiamo attaccati qua a un chiodo alla parete per lasciarli ancora maturare. Ecco, si pianta così com'è. È sempre la stessa varietà e non si modifica. Ecco. C'è un mais che va bene per questa zona in quanto, essendo la piovosità scarsa dalla primavera fino all'autunno, è un mais che richiede poca acqua, ecco, basta una pioggia ogni tanto che viene su. Invece questo qua, che aveva il chicco più piccolo, abbiamo cercato di introdurlo, ecco. Ma non vengono perché hanno bisogno di acqua, ecco. Qui manca l'acqua per irrigare. Questi sono prodotti in azienda, ecco. Prodotti in azienda, poi scegliamo le pallocchie migliori e le piantiamo di anno in anno.
Up until the beginning of this century, any breeding that was ever done was done by the growers. The man who grew, the man who cultivated, the man who harvested was the man who selected the seed that he sowed the next year, and was the man who in the end caused the evolution that resulted in characteristic varieties. That means that for every cultivator there was a breeding site.
Molto freddo. E qui conservate I semi?
Sì, sì. Fagioli, lenticchie, granone, grane, ceci, fave, piselli. Freddo che sottoterra, così.
Ma sono buoni tutti questi semi?
Sì.
No, il colore non c'entra. Questi, signor?
Fagioli.
Ah. Questi sono i fagioli. Solo un tipo di fagioli avete, di questo colore?
Sì, sì.
E perché quello è più rosso e quello è più bianco?
Così vengono.
Così vengono in queste zone.
Prima dici che sono fernato, ora sto cominciando. Ma giusto non facciamo la capa, facciamo un succo.
In the 1930s in Greece, almost everywhere you went, almost every field of wheat that you saw contained local varieties, a mixture of local varieties, a rich mixture of local varieties, of enormous genetic potential and of very, very variable performance. In 1970, the same areas, the whole of the mountain area of wheat cultivation in Greece had been given over to the cultivation of an extremely small number of varieties indeed.
Ah, questo è buono.
Questo è buono.
E questo è più, posso sai, freddo che io così. Non è come questo qua. Questo ha portato il gelo. Il gelo. Questo qua, ieri come questo qua.
E lo date agli animali quello? Da mangiare agli animali?
No, mangia la gente, gli animali noi. Mangiamo il grano, facciamo il pane per mangiare.
When I went to Afghanistan in the late 1960s, I could go into a field and in any single field might find anything up to several species, with anything up to 30, 40 and occasionally more varieties in the same field or the same group of fields associated with a single village. In the early 70s, there was a drought and a famine, and the wheat that was normally used as seed was eaten before seed wheat of the Green Revolution varieties was flown in to sow the next year's crop. Literally within 2 years, this massive introduction of uniform varieties has virtually extinguished wide stretches of genetic variation in wheat in Afghanistan.
Quindi voi guardate i semi, i semi e sapete come scegliere quelli buoni
Esatto, esattamente.
e quelli cattivi.
Si sceglie sempre il migliore, per esempio prendendo l'aglio qua. Noi prendendo questo, mica scegliamo questo qua, che non è troppo buono. Scegliamo questo che è migliore. Si sceglie sempre il migliore. Si sceglie. Noi qua non è che abbiamo il tecnico chimico, non si conosce nemmeno questo tecnico, questo chimico. Li conserviamo da noi, vediamo, questo si conserva di più, quello si conserva di meno e quello di meno. Li facciamo noi i tecnici, perché vediamo quello che si conserva di più lo manteniamo di più, quello che si conserva di meno lo consumiamo più subito.
2 years before we filmed, Italian and East German institutes combined to effect an urgent seed collection program in this region. Why an urgent program? Farming styles here are likely to change, and with the change, the varieties that have come down from previous generations are almost certain to disappear. A market on the high plains of Peru.
Ese es maíz morado.
¿Y para qué se usa esto?
Para chicha. Y se
Sí.
prepara, se hace hervir y se echa azúcar y limón y hasta la chicha.
¿Y es rico?
Es rico, agradable. Usted lo lava con agua fría porque cuando lo lava con agua caliente, toda la pintura de la coronta se va.
Se va, ¿no? These look like some of the potatoes, some of the native varieties there, but they're not potatoes. These are uyukos, and locally they're very important. They're eaten and prepared very similar to potatoes. This striped, look at that. Yes, right, this one here, striped, and you have red ones, which of course is an indication of their genetic variability. The variability that you can see is quite tremendous.
Some green ones.
Green ones, yes, right here. You see, in this batch alone, without even looking, I picked up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 different types. It was the Russians under the Russian geneticist Vavilov that first started to send expeditions to this part of the world to collect this variability, which they wanted to use in the Soviet Union. Because of the wide range of geographical and ecological conditions they have there, they thought they would find some of the variability they needed for their own conditions down here. And when they started to publish their findings from 1929 onwards, suddenly the scientific world woke up to the fact that there was this tremendous variability down here. Some of our traditional Andean potatoes, aren't you? In some parts of the Andes, the peasants call them papa de regalo, which means potatoes to give away as a present. It is to say, they're not sold in the market like the rest, but they're kept for special occasions, festivals, ceremonies, which shows you, of course, how highly prized they are. Even myself, when I go into the market in Lima to buy potatoes for the family, I look for these, rather than the modern varieties. We have had people who had seen pictures of these accuse us of cheating. They said they were sweet potatoes or some of the other Andean tuber crops. But I can assure you they are potatoes.
Why do Andean peasants grow potatoes in this?
Some of these have resistances to diseases that occur here in the Andes. Some of them might be resistant to frost. But above all, I think it's because they have a very good taste and they can be used for a variety of dishes. But a modern housewife in Europe or North America wouldn't accept anything like it, although their culinary quality is so excellent. They will want a variety with smooth skin and shallow eyes, like this modern Peruvian variety called Cusco, which I just brought in, you see? Contrast these, you see. This is what breeding has done over the centuries to the potato.
As I said, I spent quite good numbers of years of my life doing better potatoes for this country. Better in a sense, maybe worse in other sense. Better in yielding, because as you can imagine, in this country, we need more food than any other thing. If you are a breeder, unconsciously you are trying to displace the old native gene pools because you are trying to build new varieties for commercial purposes. But on the other hand, they are neglecting the old heritage, the old gene pools.
It's the cactus that protects the potato from the goats. which of course during the evolution of this species wouldn't have been around. It's the Spaniards that brought goats and sheep to South America. Before, you would only have had llamas up at this altitude. This is known as Solanum macaulay. This species persists up here because, of course, the goats don't like to get into the cacti. I mean, I myself don't want to get my hands in there. It's just,
I was hoping you were going to do it.
Yeah, of course, if they put a fire here, as they have done in this particular spot, and destroy the cactus, then, of course, the wild species will be exposed to the goats and they'll eat it. This is a very important wild species. It has already been used in breeding. There are several varieties in Northern America and Northern Europe which have this species as its ancestor. It lives up here at 4,000, 4,200 meters, so it would naturally be resistant to frost. But it is also resistant to a couple of viruses and to the potato spindle tuber viroid. It's a favorite spot for some wild species. Look, right in there. Oh yes, that's a big one. Almost looks like a cultivated one, you see? Here.
That's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, it's called Solanum bukasovi. It's named after the famous Russian explorer Bukasov, who was a member of Vavilov's team, who got to this part of the world about 60 years ago. In the history of the evolution of the potato, something like this at the edge of an oat field. This year it's oats, next year it might be potatoes, and it might have been potatoes in the past, would have cross-fertilized with cultivated potatoes and would have exchanged genes and thus have enriched the gene pool of the cultivated potato. And this would have happened with many different species, not only with this one, and it would have happened many times, thousands of times in the Andes during the history of the cultivation of the potato. But we have to remember that some of this gene exchange between wild and cultivated potato is something that's going on now in the Andes. And as long as there are wild potatoes around, this will happen. If we think there are weeds and get rid of them, of course this will stop.
When you go to the field, you don't know where are the samples. You have to look, to seek. It's not easy, because if it's not behind that big mountain, it's in that cliff, in that ravine, so you have to work, you have to walk, you have to make your effort. And suddenly you can find a sample. That's a very important part of your job, the compensation of your effort.
The International Potato Center in Lima, Peru, maintains a large collection of wild and traditional potato material. But the center's main task is to breed improved potato varieties, to breed and supply improved varieties to developing countries.
And the chance to come back into Peru to co-lead a national program. And I said that I would if they would let me develop an international potato center, similar to what the foundations had done for corn, wheat, and rice, the three commodities that are more important than potatoes as a food in the world. Potato fits into the vegetable field, so they had been somewhat neglected, but unfortunately the foundations were running out of the ability to include any other commodities. They did give good moral support, and very shortly after I came in 1966, President Belaunde had given a supreme decree saying there would be an international potato center in Peru. That didn't give us any money, it just gave me a shooting permit to go and find donors.
Este surco de papas que vemos aquí es resultado de un solo cruzamiento, de una sola hibridación, ¿no es cierto?
Es cierto.
He says that's exactly it. It's one single cross that he has made. You see a tremendous variation in here. Yellow ones, red ones, purple ones. You see?
Good grief.
They're blue inside, they're purple inside. Can you imagine a dish of mashed potatoes from these? Purple mashed potatoes? No? But you see, this is the sort of potato that people have been eating for hundreds of years in this part of the world.
Por ejemplo, acá vemos este material.
sumamente raro que tiene posibilidad de mejorarse.
Although it's strange, it might have qualities which are good for future breeding programs. It might have resistances that we don't know about yet.
Que tiene una forma muy rara, ¿no?
From the beginning of SIP, we have started to send this material out to the national programs, but well, people were not trained yet, and it was always very disappointing when scientists have visited national programs, looked at their materials, and came back and reported was lost. Training was 2 years going on. We did not have any materials. We did not have training materials. And since I was with the trainees, well, I was with a problem. I had a problem. They asked me constantly, do you have something about this and this problem? So my major effort at SIP here is to produce training materials. This one here was for the germplasm management course in Colombia. We have now a management course coming up in Kenya. These papers are all in Spanish. We produce this one here in English and Spanish, this one here into Hindi.
This is my own particular breeding program. These don't look anything. They're almost deformed looking little tubers. They are already selected for resistance to a very bad disease, bacterial wilt, which occurs in all tropical and subtropical countries of the world. And when I had assembled a nice little population with resistant wild types, I started intercrossing them in order to put up the frequency of the resistance genes in that particular population. Okay, Peter, I'll show you now what I've come up with after 3 generations. Let me get some of my improved material.
Right.
You can judge for yourself. Yeah, this is just after 3 generations and 1 backcross. You see now, if you compare these wild ones with the improved ones. Here, I have a potato which is at the commercial level, although it has to be tested and retested before it ever will get into a farmer's field. This is only 2 generations removed from this.
One thing that we're a bit worried about, and that's this plant patent rights that you find in Europe so much. We send a clone to a European breeder, and he says he wants to use it in his breeding program, fine and dandy, but he finds out that some country wants some seed of it, and so he patents it. And that makes it his variety as far as the European common market is concerned. And we didn't breed that for them to get patents on or to charge the developing world for this material as something that's owned by them. And this I don't agree with at all. I'm violently opposed to it. And if I thought some of these companies were doing this, I would flat out refuse to send them the material. I'm not going to name any of them by name, but all of your European potato seed exporting companies are involved in this because they have the plant patent laws within the European community.
Here in Peru, we have had excellent relations with the host country. Mainly probably because we've kept our facilities modest. We have kept our image as low as possible. And wherever we could, we have pushed the ability of national scientists to the forefront. And obviously, without the help of the nationals, we could not have gone to the remote areas of this country to have collected the genetic resources. You will see no country club approach. I love to spend about 1.5 hours to 2 hours a day when I am here playing front-on with the workers, who are obviously those that are in the best physical condition here. And I think they enjoy seeing a director general playing with them. And as I tell them, everybody is a director general on the sports field.
I already have succeeded in my work. It's not easy, believe me, to put 10 years of your life every day working and gathering a mass of living collection, which is at the present time saved. From now, in 10 years, if I will be still present on the face of the earth, and you too, because nobody have the life, for sure. We can talk again if we have this happy opportunity.
Ik kruis ook hoofdzakelijk op export. Want hier in dat kleine landje, daar ben je zo uitgeëten van dat beetje aardappels dat hier gebruikt wordt. Voor die export zijn er veel meer mogelijkheden. Ik ben in 72 begonnen en de marine die komt van 72. Die is van het eerste jaar eruit gerold.
Gelijk al, na het eerste jaar.
Ja, dat zal wel geluk wezen.
Wat een geluk, ja.
Ik weet niet precies hoeveel landen dat de marine staat, maar ik denk van wel in 30 landen. Of...
Ja, die is natuurlijk iedere keer als ik hem tref nieuwsgierig naar de ontwikkeling van de marine en de mogelijkheden die er zijn. Nou, doe nog maar net wat je altijd doet als je mij ziet.
Ja, dan moet ik Fries praten en dat verstaan ze niet.
Dat een ras van de Nederlandse kweker niet alleen in Nederland een aanzienlijke verbreiding krijgt, maar ook in België, Frankrijk, Engeland, Duitsland, Denemarken, tot soms nog landen verderaf, tot zelfs in Nieuw-Zeeland.
Dr. Mastenbroek is the president of the World Seed Trade Association. The association supports the concept of plant patenting, arguing that their members need a patent system to ensure they earn a fair return on new varieties they have developed.
En alleen in zo'n geval dat een ras geteeld wordt in een groot aantal landen, 10 of 12 of nog meer verschillende landen, op aanzienlijke schaal. Alleen in zo'n geval zal een kweker veel geld verdienen aan dat ras. Maar een ras wat 3 jaar in het verkeer is en dan tegenvalt en dus weer verdwijnt van de rassenlijst of gewoon door de boeren niet gekocht wordt, daarvan heeft de kweker geen enkele winst.
Hoeveel zit er daar nou aan?
Ja, dat wil ik even voorzichtig doen.
Ja. Wat is dat?
Dat is een Amerikaan.
Oh.
Hij is wel, het is een Amerikaan, is meegesmokeld in het punt van de schoen. Ik weet dat daarop maar.
Ja, nee, echt?
Oh,
Waar heeft u die gevonden?
Ja, dat zeg ik niet.
Waar?
Dat maakt niet
Waar
uit.
heeft u die gevonden?
Ze komen feitelijk van de Universiteit van Vancouver.
Er moet ook een hele sterke mate van vertrouwen zijn over en weer. Wij hebben bijvoorbeeld, wanneer dat er niet zou zijn, in ons proefveld van al die 65 kwekers verschillende zaailingen liggen te beproeven. Wij zouden heel goed een zaailing van Brunia, wanneer ik Brunia nou niet zo erg graag mocht, zou ik gemakkelijk een zaailing van Brunia kunnen verwisselen voor een ander. En daarmee Brunia benadelen en een andere kweker dus bevoordelen.
A plant breeder sees any other variety as competition because his aim is breeding a variety which replaces that. If that's not his aim, he wouldn't be involved in plant breeding. I mean, it's like a car salesman. I mean, if he represents Ford Motors, you see, he wants everybody to drive in a Ford, and he sees Opel as his competitor. Oh, so a plant breeder also sees any variety. Pain in the neck, you know. That variety shouldn't be there. His variety should be there.
I started in plant breeding because as a child I was hypnotized by the rather poetic notion of making 2 blades of grass grow where one grew before. It's a well-known idealistic theme that excites us when we're young and uncritical. And I was breeding for many years before I realized that the second blade of grass that I had made to grow or was trying to make to grow was causing a severe depression of the price on the market. And there were very, very many people who were very anxious to eliminate it. and to go back to the one where the price was well maintained than to have the two with the price low and dropping. So it's not enough to produce more. You have to produce more and make sure that the poorest man in the world gets his share of it.
Venancia, pecho de cabra, pelo de noche, venancia. Por nacer en la montaña, sos hija de la guerrilla, compañera campesina.
The wheat growing area west of Paris, France.
Que sos arrecha, venancia, te grita el cerro quemado, porque llevas el recado al compañero Bernardino.
Tené cuidado, venancia, si te agarran te torturan, y a tu mamá le dejaron en su vestido de manta la huella del comandante. Ellos tienen un fusil, con un hermano enterrado, que mataron los soldados porque era del sindicato.
Ellos tienen un fusil, con su hermano enterrado.
C'est-à-dire le blé, finalement, était une plante très bien adaptée à la région naturellement. Donc c'est ce qui nous a poussé, pendant une certaine époque, à développer énormément le blé, puisque actuellement j'ai encore 80% donc, de ma surface qui est en blé. Bon, actuellement ils importent par exemple en Haute-Volta, ils mangent du pain, hein, et tout le pain effectivement vient de, enfin la farine vient de France, même de cette région aussi en fait.
Ah bon?
Ouais. Mais enfin, disons, ça représente des quantités dérisoires, puisque moi, justement, j'ai calculé au niveau, par exemple, du pays, la Haute-Volta, il faut 50 agriculteurs de notre région pour nourrir toute la Haute-Volta en pain. Donc, bon, c'est pas... au niveau importance du marché, c'est nul, quoi.
Les Anglais.
Oui, mais le pain anglais est très mauvais.
Mais le pain anglais est très mauvais.
Et le blé anglais, il est bon pour les cochons. Puis
on est d'accord.
Faut pas raconter
Ben, le pain, il n'y a pas de pain en Angleterre.
Comment on dit, English brûle. Dégueulasse.
Exactement.
Bon, voilà.
De plus en plus, on fabrique le pain avec des appareils qui vont de plus en plus vite. Un petit peu comme on fait des voitures à la chaîne, des automobiles à la chaîne. Donc automatiquement, le blé doit avoir une qualité capable de supporter tous ces nouveaux appareils. Au niveau du pétrissage, au niveau de la fabrication de la farine et du pain. Donc automatiquement, la qualité que vont demander les gens qui font de la farine pour ensuite faire du pain, va donc une qualité qui va évoluer au cours du temps. Et donc cette qualité évoluant, les sélectionneurs automatiquement vont normalement suivre un petit peu cette évolution et chercher de plus en plus des qualités, des variétés qui auront des qualités correspondant à cette demande précise.
Je viens de manger du puceron.
Puis vous avez vu, il y a des tourbillons là.
Bon, ben ça, c'est du pied.
Ouais. C'est pas les coups de vent. Hein.
Non.
Non.
Si.
Voilà. Ça, c'est le pied à verre, c'est-à-dire que la variété a été sensible et qu'elle a accusé, enfin, au moment d'un coup de vent, elle a été plus faible et en conséquence, elle est versée. Voilà.
C'est le pied qui est en mauvais état.
Voilà. C'est ce qu'on appelle
un
la
champignon.
maladie, c'est un champignon qui rentre dans la plante.
C'est à vous de vous tenir au courant.
Ah bon, te tenir au courant d'une année sur l'autre. Tu sais très bien comment que les cultivars toujours la même connerie que l'année d'avant.
Pour te situer, l'année prochaine, le talent, vous le foutez au trou.
Bah oui, un exemple.
Parce que vous en vendrez pas.
Bah ouais, le festival va prendre
terminé.
Par contre, s'il y a un coup de froid, ou s'il y a des semis difficiles, on fera du talent. Parce qu'on peut semer du talent jusqu'au 15 février.
Et puis du festival aussi. Oh, non.
Tu sais, il y a des fois les
Vous avez une
variétés.
tolérance.
Parce que les variétés de blé en France, c'est comme les chapeaux de femmes, ça. Ça dépend de la mode. Tiens, c'est pas tout à fait ce que m'a dit.
On se trouve excédentaire en céréales, qu'on se trouve obligé d'exporter. Donc, bon, un de nos objectifs, c'est effectivement trouver des cultures de substitution au blé. Le tournesol semble avoir un certain avenir dans cette région-ci. Enfin, il est limite au point de vue adaptation génétique, mais on compte le cultiver sous plastique et on peut gagner, disons, un certain nombre de degrés grâce au plastique, ce qui permettrait quand même d'arriver à avoir une production correcte ici. Du point de vue structure du sol, d'abord les racines du pain sont pivotantes et descendent très profond dans le sol. Donc elles éclatent la terre, en particulier ici dans des terres argileuses, c'est particulièrement utile. Tout à l'heure, on a essayé 2 variétés. Il y en avait une qui venait du Chili et l'autre, en fait, je crois qu'elle venait d'Afrique du Nord. C'était du Maroc qu'elle venait.
I think that industrialized countries have recognized for some decades now the value of plant genetic resources. And because they are in a position of being gene importers, and because third world countries are gene exporters, developed countries have proposed a concept of common heritage, that all of the genetic diversity of the world should be seen as the common heritage of all of humanity. In translation, what that means is that the poor of the world are being asked to donate the raw materials of a major industry to the rich of the world, to do that for free.
There's certainly old seeds here. Oh yes, plenty.
A search for wild sweet potato types in arid Central Australia.
There's some over there, maybe?
Yeah, only on a tree there.
Yeah. Let's have a look at these ones, huh? Peter Latz found this plant, I don't know how many years ago. And he and I have been here twice together, looking for not only flowers, but also even the leaves. And we've always been at the wrong time. What you're witnessing, I suppose, is a sort of minor moment in Australian botany. It's pretty minor, but it's a moment just the same.
What do you think they might name it?
Oh, no idea.
Well,
I hope they
name
it after Latz, because he discovered it.
Who's going to use it? And for what? Is it going to be used by a private company? 9 chances out of 10 say that it is. Is it going to be used to increase yield? Again, 90% of the cases would answer yes. And who's going to eat it in the end, in a very large measure, doesn't matter at all. The nutritive value doesn't matter at all. The protein content doesn't matter at all. What matters is, does it look well? Will it sell? Will somebody buy it? And how much will we make on the deal?
Bush potato, a real big one like a pumpkin. And other bush potato called naja. Yeah, long ones like sweet potato.
It just occurs here. The Aborigines collect it. It survives the collection, it survives the climate, it survives the soil.
Make them black, purple. After that, take them ground. One man and cabra and cook them. Eat them. Not the yamas. There's another bush potato we want to come up and show you more. Like pumpkin in the ground again.
If we lose all the primitive genes such as are contained in these potatoes, if we were to lose these, and this particular population we've got lost looking for, that could easily be extinct. We would lose a set of genes which may be tremendously useful in future agriculture.
Does this suggest that they're getting rare?
Oh, no. No, what we're going for is rare anyway, but it's not usually lost.
the moist highlands of tropical Costa Rica.
Y las utilizan para cuando la gente se siente cansada. Entonces coge un poquito de raíz, un manojito, lo hierve y toma. A veces la hierven con leche y le endulzan si gusta y se toma unas 2 tacitas al día y eso es un reconstituyente.
Nuestros indígenas son muy dados a su utilización y desde 1890 estaban sacándola y la vendían para la exportación a los Estados Unidos principalmente.
There are held large collections of genetic diversity in Seat, in Zip, in Simit, thousands and thousands of samples, but it is limited to a very specific number of crops. Potatoes in Peru, wheat and maize in Mexico, cassava, beans and fodder plants at Seat. So I think the contribution they are financing in maintaining this variability is extremely good. But this doesn't mean that there is really enough done in maintaining in other crops which do not have a specific center who is dealing with them.
Por la sombra del camino van los indios hacia el pueblo, van bajando la montaña porque es 1 de enero. Lleva Paulo do Bautizo.
The United States Ambassador to Costa Rica visits the Costa Rican-based International Research Center, CATIE.
El patrón va entrando a misa, disfrazado de cordero que sin vergüenza se da golpes en el pecho, pero es muy duro ese cuero. Se da golpes en el pecho, pero es muy duro ese cuero. Por ser 1 de enero, van los indios hacia el pueblo, van bajando la montaña, porque 1 de enero llevan gallinas al cura por milagro venidero, o a rogar porque este invierno lleva mucho en el potrero.
El árbol arde hasta verde casi, por eso le dan el nombre de canfín o querosén, le dicen copal. ¿Ves? Y también es una madera muy buena para la construcción y colectamos 1400 especies de árboles y que fueron analizados solo el tallo y algunas de ellas están dando resultados muy interesantes contra el cáncer. Y esos extractos se enviaban a los Estados Unidos, a Carolina del Sur.
The United States is making a very big drive on medicinal plants. The reason is obviously linked to the fact that the pharmaceutical companies can make very big profit margins out of the products of useful selection of this material. They're not striking all that blindly in the dark either, because many of these plants have been already fairly well studied and they have a fairly good idea in what species and genera the most effective responses to selection for drugs are likely to be found. As far as I'm concerned, there should be no restriction of any sort. These are a public resource. They must be used for a public benefit.
No hay un programa sistemático para recolectar materiales que no tengan un interés comercial, también entre comillas, porque se busca frutos que tengan reconocido prestigio, ¿no? Y lo que interesa también es buscar árboles que no tienen ese prestigio.
We should be clear and frank and should say, well, this is for genetic improvement and breeding programs. It's always the case in the international centers. And this you have always in the industrialized countries. They know exactly that they, on the long run, cannot afford to have collections of which they do not know actually what they're going to do with it. And this is part of the criticism we suffered from, especially from the donor agency. They now want to know what is going on. They want to know what it is for, what it is good for.
De 401, 59, maximum 30.
Hoe laat ben je hier?
105.
240.
Maximum 90, heren. 90.
What we try to do is to beautify the world, and that's a great thing. And a very normal source is you just ask other people, other firms in the business for samples, or you buy certain things. And apart from that, some collecting can be done through botanical gardens, through traveling abroad and finding interesting plants of which you take some material. Or I don't invent flowers. What I do is I try to improve the various characteristics, and I try to improve the qualities.
If you are involved in plant breeding and if your varieties are successful, you are responsible for making sure that the material which is replaced is being collected, stored and maintained. While in the past in Europe, you had commercial plant breeding companies, they didn't have to feel that responsibility. And quite rightly, you see, that's the system. A commercial company should make money. I mean, if it would stop making money, the system doesn't work anymore. See? So it's no criticism, you see, but we perhaps should have realized earlier, or plant breeders should have realized earlier, that then government institutions should have collected all these end races, but that's afterthought. Okay? It's you know, genetic variation didn't seem a limiting factor.
The wild species, some of them are from South America, from Bolivia, Peru, Argentina. Others are from Mexico, or even a few from the southern part of the United States. We have been on collection trips in Bolivia where we have found more than 500 accessions of approximately 35 different species. We are testing here for late blight, and this disease is all over the world and it can destroy sometimes a whole potato crop. In the case of late blight, I think we need some better sources of resistance. So we need this wild and primitive forms for further breeding for resistance.
Komt die oorspronkelijk alleen uit Zuid-Amerika?
Ja, de Inca's hadden dus met name deze soort voor hun een voedselgewas was. En de knollen werden geroosterd en gegeten. We hebben dus in Santiago een tent gekocht en een slaapzak en een paar pannetjes. En we zijn met een gehuurde auto op stap gegaan de wildernis in. En wij wisten dus uiteraard uit beschrijvingen en contacten die wij daar hadden welke gebieden voor ons interessant zouden zijn. Die hebben we verpakt en naar Nederland gestuurd.
De komkommers zoals we die in Nederland nu hebben, zijn een product van vele jaren veredeling. Maar tot op heden is daar nauwelijks wild materiaal bij gebruikt. Deze komt uit het bergland van Nepal, de Himalaya. En normaal probeer je hier ziekteresistenties in op te sporen en in te kruisen in je eigen cultuurvariëteit. In die Afrikaanse soorten zijn er een aantal die net de resistenties hebben waar wij nu juist naar zoeken. We hebben getracht om naar zo primitief mogelijk komkommermateriaal te zoeken. Dat materiaal, de echte wilde komkommer, is helaas vermoedelijk niet meer te vinden. Die is van de aarde verdwenen.
I mean, there was considerable genetic variation in Europe of a number of crops, but the centers of diversity were outside Europe. So, although we lost a lot of that material, the genes are probably still available elsewhere, but if the same process would take place in those developing countries, well, then we really are talking about genetic erosion. And as I said, someone else has said, genetic extinction is forever. I mean, once you lose it, you've lost it, you say. You can't get it back.
Our gene bank here has also both aspects, so international and national. Of course, we do have material here which is utilized and probably will be utilized in the near future in our breeding programs.
Wij proberen hier in Nederland om mais aan te passen aan de Nederlandse condities. Nou, ons koude tolerantieprogramma dat startte in 1973. En we hebben nu materiaal wat goed is aangepast aan onze omstandigheden. En wat momenteel ook een goede voorjaarsgroei heeft. Goed groen blijft ook bij lage temperaturen. Bij ons is het juist de groei bij lage temperatuur erg belangrijk. We hebben materiaal uit Bolivia gebruikt. Hele leuke eigenschappen had voor blijven bij een lage temperatuur. En ook een goede groei vertoonde bij lage temperatuur.
After independence, most of these countries have lost their collections. So it needs to be recollected, or in some cases the whole material was lost. So in this, I think there is some reason for having gene banks when there are reliable gene banks. I mean, gene banks where you know they are responsible for the material, and not by means of any political changes that today is a priority, tomorrow it's no priority anymore.
Before, it used to be a strictly technical problem. How do you collect material? How do you store material? How much should you collect, and so on. And in the past few years, it has also become a political issue. And the reasons are very obvious. Many of the centers of origin of our major crops are in the tropics and subtropics. And while the major plant breeding programs are in the developed countries. And therefore, developing countries now are starting to question, say, what is happening with their genetic resources, who's using them, and what is their role in this.
Es parte del piquete. Claro.
Parte del piquete.
Pasaba mi ayudante, el martillo con el pincel.
Trayendo en tu pecho la esperanza, como una flor acrisolada en la dignidad de mi país.
There's a tradition in the town of Masaya that on the anniversary of the death of a close relative, the family provides a meal for the whole community. The shared meal is both food and a remembrance. It is made from maize.
Trabajaba con los niños, con la gente. Así, Tito, sí. Él negociaba ropa y cosas para así. Y la ganancia, claro que era para subsistir él. Y en el año, o sea, en Navidad, él le obsequiaba a los niños. Muñecos, bolas, así, que otras cositas que él creía conveniente. Comenzó a caer preso, mejor dicho, ¿verdad? Porque él era opositor. De la ideología, él era opositor, o sea, contrario al sistema que existía, que era el somocismo, ¿verdad? Bueno, el 21 de mayo de 72, a las 12 del día, él quedó de venir a Mazatepe a casarse con una señora aquí. Pero a las 12, a la 1 de la tarde nos avisaron por teléfono que fue, llamaron a mi papá y fue. Un sacerdote que estaba de capellán allí en el hospital El Retiro, le llamó a mi papá diciéndole que lo habían asesinado a Tito. Y él mismo decía, yo quiero que le manden periódicamente a los presos porque aguantamos mucha hambre, ahí no estamos detenidos. Y ultraje pues, ¿verdad? Que le andaban. Con eso cumplimos.
¿Cuidado se queman?
El aniversario.
El aniversario.
Sí, mi mamá acostumbra a hacer este año con año una comida para darle a los niños, a los pueblos, a la gente pobre, que amistades de la casa. Porque, o sea, ella escoge siempre la masa de... Bueno, es que es lo que más se da en Mazatepe, es la comida típica de Mazatepe.
Alimento precioso, come la familia, come todo el pueblo. Graneros se llenan de blanca semilla, rica de energías, con ansias de paz y también libertad.
La empresa de semillas, de granos básicos sobre todo, en nuestro país era dominada por transnacionales como la Pioneer, la Decal. Entonces teníamos estas transnacionales, eran las que distribuían y producían los materiales, las semillas mejoradas. En realidad estas empresas no tenían esa política e interés por capacitar a los recursos nacionales. Con el triunfo de la revolución, estas compañías desaparecen. Unas maquinarias utilizadas para la producción de semillas fueron averiadas durante la Guerra de Liberación y que hubo necesidad de rehabilitarlos con toda la inventiva que se podía desarrollar a nivel local, a nivel nacional. Pero lo que más hacía falta eran los materiales mismos, las semillas y los técnicos capaces de echar adelante estos programas.
Casi la mayoría de esos materiales se perdieron por el saqueo. Perdimos variedades sintéticas de nuestros materiales criollos del país, termoplasma criollo, pues, que nos había costado mucho. Y fracasamos, pues, porque lo perdimos todo. Entonces, después del triunfo nos encontramos de que no tenemos un grano de maíz para comenzar la nueva era.
La colección de maíz de Nicaragua existe en México, en el CIMIT, y esas todavía no nos han llegado, pero ya están solicitadas. También nos hemos visto en ese problema, ¿no? de que a veces no son políticas muy abiertas, no siempre tienen sus políticas conservadoras. Entonces es mejor pues nosotros tenerlas aquí, conservarlas aquí y manejarlas aquí.
In 1976, the Rome-based International Board for Plant Genetic Resources wrote to the United States Department of Agriculture. The board asked whether the United States would formally accept global responsibility for the long-term storage of a number of world crops. The written reply was positive, but there would be strings.
The letter said that while it was the policy of the United States to exchange this material freely with everyone, that for political reasons, some countries would be denied access from time to time. In 1981, the American government was asked to confirm that this policy was still in effect. The answer was yes. We have asked Dr. Quentin Jones of the American Germplasm Conservation Program to tell us which countries now have been denied access to germplasm. We have never received a full list, but we have been told that the embargo applies to Afghanistan, Albania, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Cuba, and Nicaragua. As I understand it now, maize material collected in Nicaragua in the 1960s, which is now in American gene banks, is not being returned to Nicaragua. I think that's an outrage for all of humanity.
From the very beginning of the UN germplasm exchange program that we initiated in the middle 1960s, we have always made very strong insistence on two things. Germplasm should be freely available to all who may benefit mankind by their access to it. That there should be no restrictions to the exchange of germplasm between nations. For many years, the FAO program on genetic conservation operated by observing these conditions until it was taken over by the International Board for Plant Genetic Resources, which is a CGIAR operation. And this is not a UN body. nor is it a body answerable to any publicly elected or representative body. Debate began to develop around the question of free availability of genetic resources. What do you mean by free?
Mr. Kieran Fickett is the Netherlands' chief legal advisor on international laws concerning plant patents and the exchange of plant genetic material.
Do you see any reason why third world countries shouldn't charge for the germplasm to go out in the first place?
No. Unless the general acceptance of the free access of germplasm differs, is going to change. But since, as long as it's generally accepted that the genetic resources, wild species, germplasm, whatever you want to call it, is have free access for whole mankind. I don't see justification of charging people collecting germplasm.
Het is dus niet helemaal fair, om het mild uit te drukken, om te verlangen dat tegenover de import van vanuit een ontwikkelingsland naar een ontwikkeld land van een gen of van enkele genen, dan tegenover moet staan een gratis teruggaan naar het ontwikkelingsland van een ras waar zoveel meer toegevoegde waarde in zit. Toegevoegde waarde die met veel moeite en veel kosten is toegevoegd. Terwijl aan het hebben van het kunnen vinden van bepaalde genen in een land, dat is niet iets waar een menselijke prestatie bij te pas is gekomen. Dus ik vind het niet helemaal fair, niet helemaal terecht, als tegenover die gratis import van genen dan een gratis teruggaan van rassen zou moeten staan.
It has been accepted that breeding materials need not necessarily be freely exchanged. This is already a limitation. They said, oh no, there is no limitation implied, because the final variety may be freely exchanged with any plant breeder anywhere in the world without any difficulty. And I think the people who made this point clear failed to understand that the final variety is of relatively little importance. It already is a fixed line selected out from a population which has possessed a rich spectrum of genetic potential and has been limited down to a narrow genetic base. And the availability of this to plant breeders is of relatively limited importance. And so, in fact, the debate continues.
It's nice to dream, but it's very hard to struggle against facts. The real fact is the lack of food. As I mentioned also, not to live on dreams. Dreams are to gather all the varieties, all the species, the ancestors of the present cultivated material of any crop, but mainly potatoes in our case. We are not in position in any country of the third world to do such a job, because we don't have modern equipment, we don't have very fancy laboratories, we don't have budget to maintain this type of work, but we do have every single hour the pressure of food, of needs, of hungry.
I work now 4 years in the trade union, and I'm glad to work in it because it's in the trade union are also the land workers, and I know from the history of the land workers, the history of the way land workers organize themselves, that they have an old goal, and that is that things like the land belongs very much to the people and not especially companies or farms. I mean, that's like, you know, that's like the water or the sun. So also the land is something for all the human beings, and especially the land workers are very much aware of it. Now, a lot of genetic material is in the third world. Our people can't think themselves that different regions in the third world becomes the property of a few big companies. It's incredible. For them, there's no need of discussing if that is necessary or not, because that also belongs to mankind, and it has to be kept for mankind.
A year after our journey to Nicaragua, it was announced that the United States was to return maize collected in Nicaragua to Nicaragua.
Franca, no tengo hasta el momento un dato, pero sí cuesta un poco caro, ¿no? Sobre todo la unidad.
The seed of 64 traditional maize types was delivered, but the types had been so badly stored in the United States that half died when planted. Today in Nicaragua, there is a major drive to store local genetic resources locally.
Como tú puedes ver aquí, estamos sobre lo que en un futuro será el cuarto frío, ¿no? Sí. En primera instancia se pensaba colectar y almacenar solamente semillas de frijol, pero viendo la necesidad, ¿no?, de otros cultivos que también son prioritarios en la actualidad, entonces se ha pensado poder colectar y almacenar de otros cultivos.
O sea que nosotros consideramos que con las ganas que tenemos y con $5 que nos den por ahí, nosotros hacemos maravillas.
Venancia, pecho de cabra, pelo de noche venancia, por nacer en la montaña, sos hija de la guerrilla, compañera campesina.
Dat wij verschillende planten en zaden in ons land hebben gekweekt. En die zaden hebben hun weg gevonden naar het westen. Vandaag komen we hier om met u te praten en te kijken welke weg deze zaden hebben afgelegd.
Ellos tienen un fusil, vos un hermano enterrado, que mataron los soldados porque era del sindicato. Ellos tienen un fusil, vos un hermano enterrado, que mataron los soldados porque era del sindicato. Tener cuidado, venancia, compañera campesina.
They know when there's something underneath. She finds the crown of the plant and she just pursues that crack down. And she's found a tuber there.
It's a desert-adapted species. So this one, to me, has possibilities for world agriculture if it can be domesticated.
Venancia, pecho de cabra, pelo de noche venancia, por nacer en la montaña, sos hija de la guerrilla, compañera campesina.
Que sos arrecha venancia, te grita el cerro quemado, porque llevas el recado al compañero compañero Bernardino.
Tené cuidado, Venancia, si te agarran te torturan. Y a tu mamá le dejaron en su vestido de manta la huella del comandante. Ellos tienen un fusil, con un hermano enterrado.
Vandaag komen we hier om met u te praten en te kijken welke weg deze zaden hebben afgelegd. En we komen met elkaar bijna in een disharmonie, omdat iedereen een zekere rijkdom wil verwerven en de een dat soms ten koste van de ander doet. Vandaag komen we hier om met u te praten en we hopen dat u van uw kant begrip zult opbrengen voor ons standpunt en van onze kant wij tot inzicht te kunnen komen waarom u een bepaald standpunt inneemt.
Andanya magic. Nya magic apa nangin mana benda tu ni. Hari jam kau cakap dal kita kau bayam. Kau jangan tambah lama takar. I see the book about me. There's a wallow and the seed about. We love them. We have a big fly. Okay. Cara malam aku lihat nina amor dengan nama nina gitu negara na. Kalah. This one is small one, young one. Yeah.